been at the incubator since February, so relatively new. I was working for the Obama administration for his entire second term as a senior advisor on innovation and competitiveness policy. So we worked a lot with startups on designing policies to help the new economy, digital economy, data economy, proliferate in the United States and abroad. Now I work with small companies, and it's certainly gets me up in the morning. Halcyon Incubator is a very unique model. We have 55 companies in our portfolio. We're in Washington, D.C. We're exclusively a social enterprise incubator. We are a residential incubator, so all of the companies that are admitted to Halcyon actually live at the facility in Georgetown and Washington. So we get the founder and the co-founder typically that live for 5 months free of charge at our facility. They receive a $10,000 stipend. The facility is basically designed to avoid all of the distractions that an early stage company would encounter as far as cost of living is concerned, as far as other distractions that an early stage company would encounter. And it's a very inspirational space. They basically have a 30,000 square foot house to kind of do their work in and host their meetings. We have a whole crew of corporate sponsors, Amazon, Deloitte, communications companies, legal firms. They provide all of their professional services to our startups for free, pro bono. Each of the companies receives a $10,000 stipend when they arrive, a professional mentor with expertise in their sector, and leadership training and an entire set of skills. So in the 5 months that a startup is incubated at Halcyon, we figure that we can probably pack a couple years of development into what their startup is aiming to achieve. We have a very broad definition of social enterprise. We have 7 of our companies are actually here at GES. I think they're still all in bed. Otherwise, I would introduce them to you. And I would be too, but that's okay. But just to give you an example of kind of companies that we think are pushing the limit of social enterprise, we're incubating a company now called Traxel that has figured out a way to miniaturize fiber optic cable and lay it on the surface of roads to bridge digital divide. They patented a resin that goes on the paint lines of roads. It's 1/10 the price of trenching or producing overhead lines. We see it as a social enterprise because it's going to bring high-speed internet to people that normally in rural areas around the world who wouldn't normally have access to that at 1/10 the price. And that's a for-profit company. 75% of our companies are for-profit. If you're ever in Washington, please look me up. You're all welcome. I'd love to give you a tour. The facility, you have to see it to really see what we do. But thank you. That's in Georgetown, in Washington, D.C. Yeah, we're not just politicians there. We actually build businesses.
So good morning. I'm Deepanita. I am the chairman and CEO of a research park and incubator, both in Hyderabad and Bangalore. This is the first life science park in India. It's also the largest life science park in India. It was started by the second largest bank in India and the largest private bank, ICICI. The reason it was started was, that was in 2000. We need to create these enabling agencies that promote innovation. So our mission is to foster an ecosystem for innovation. We're not talking of just physical incubators. We go beyond physical incubators, and really India and potentially the entire world is our, wherever there's a need, we will be there. We started our startup incubator in 2006. Our first incubating company, Laurus Labs, had its IPO last year, December 2016, and $700 million valuation. And it's a global company now. It does active pharmaceutical ingredients. They have 40 to 60% market share of 6 APIs. And what the founder tells me, the CEO and the founder tells me is, Deepanita, half of the people who take HIV drugs for HIV have my API in it. That is impact. But it's a valuable company, it has high valuation. So we are actually trying to see how do you promote companies of that nature. We went to Bangalore 2.5 years back to set up an incubator. It's the largest makerspace in India. We felt that we need to create the culture of making in India. And when I say making in India, you need a prototyping lab. Ours is basically a product incubator and science park. So we are not into IT. Uh, Initially, we started with life sciences, and in Hyderabad, it's just not med tech, it's all engineering. Because we felt if we have to do med tech, we need to get all kinds of engineering people in the same building because 250 people from various areas, because peer to peer learning is huge.
Thank you, folks, for the intro and giving us a sense of what you guys do. I think I can speak on behalf of the panel here. We want to keep it as interactive as possible, as opposed to trying really hard to put you to sleep. So we'd like to get a sense of who the audience is. In full admission and disclosure, the title of the panel leads one to think that it could be CEOs of incubators versus incubators building CEOs. So let's clarify that by quick show of hands. How many entrepreneurs slash CXOs? Okay, so it's good 40%. How many incubators, accelerators? Oh, fantastic.
About half and half. That's good.
And how many non A and B? Investors, two investors at least that I know. Investors, okay. Employees who want to be CEOs of A or B? Oh, fabulous, great. Good. This keeps it very diverse. So I'll tell you what T-Hub is. We are the largest startup incubator in the country today in terms of real estate as well as in terms of number of startups. We're also building the world's largest, which will be up the middle of next year. But the incubator takes care of all the startups that are at a certain stage, which we call early stage, defined by anyone that gets funding less than 3 million or revenue less than a million. That's how they come in. The second pillar that we have is called corporate innovation. So we take problem statements from across the world in fundamentally 5 sectors: health tech, fintech, smart cities, transportation, and logistics. And then we solve those problems while looking at global entrepreneurs who have a piece of technology that has already solved it. So we act as a marriage broker, if you will. Then we bring them into the program, and then we have 3 products: scouting, scaling, and nano accelerator. We just ran out of words. And then get them to embed themselves onto the corporate distribution platform. So the startups who come on board have 5 objectives that they meet with at the end of the program. So an acquisition, an acqui-hire, an OEM deal, a licensing deal, or a joint venture. So revenue is why these startups come to us. Access to reducing product life cycle is why corporates come to us. And the third is an international program where we liaise with ecosystems like Israel, where the top entrepreneurs from India can go and get themselves embedded into a brand new ecosystem, and the other way around. So that gives you a sense of what T-Hub is. You also have a very good sense of diversity, and I was scribbling notes. Do you guys have a sense of the difference between an incubator, accelerator, venture builder? Okay. So we'll go around, and I also did want to touch upon the difference between innovators, and entrepreneurs. I think it's good to know that at least from our perspective. So I'll try and stitch up the definition, and feel free to jump right in. So the incubator is a little more, compared to an accelerator, is much more loosely coupled. It has a physical infrastructure, not necessarily backed by capital that goes into a startup. So if you're an entrepreneur, you come into an incubator, there is a physical play. The incubator provides you with a slew of services that are reasonably tactical in nature. Company secretarial services, legal services, hiring services, etc. Ideally, well, more often than not, it's 1 year long. It's almost like a lease agreement, and like the word defines itself, you are incubating an idea to go to the next level. An accelerator is much more condensed. It's typically, if you look at YC, Techstars, etc., it's 90 days. So the idea is you shrink down the interventions that are required. You condense it in those 90 days. The startup is primed to take off because of the touch points that you get. through the mentorship angle and everything else that the interventions provide. There's also access to capital, sometimes, not all the time, that an accelerator provides. And as the definition goes, you take off very quickly, which would otherwise have taken you a much longer time. That's the fundamental difference between an incubator and an accelerator. A venture builder, like Aliza put out, the mouth of the funnel is designed to take in startups and entrepreneurs who are a little more advanced, and therefore the venture builder is geared towards more success.
I'm using the word wrong.
No, no. So sorry. Go ahead. That's what diversity is all about.
The truth is I think that when we coined the term, we didn't realize other people were using the term.
Sure,
So
sure,
apparently other
sure.
people are using the term for other reasons, and so now we'll have to
interesting.
find another term.
That's a great point. We tried to build this thing called the hypo accelerator because accelerator is so widely used, and then Microsoft told us that we have a patent on this. So,
Oh.
yeah. So I'm not surprised.
So if you know of anyone with a patent on Venture Builder, don't tell them about us.
Sure, sure. But that gives you a sense of the difference in terms of phraseology between these pieces of nomenclature that you come across.
For accelerators, there is a definite prerequisite and also a set of deliverables because it's short. It could be 90 days to 120 days to 180 days. It
Yeah.
could be 6 months as well, depending on which sector it is. And it is typically a cohort-based because then you can really align the services much better. You can focus much better. So accelerators are typically cohort, whether it's medtech or whatever.
But we take very early stage companies, and the principal criteria for getting admittance into the Halcyon incubator is that they have a transformative idea. I mean, something that is really going to address a major 21st century challenge. And a lot of the people that are doing that are innovators, inventors, but they're not business people.
Sure.
And what we do is we take that person where we see that remarkable potential, so I see them as kind of innovators,
Right.
and we actually help them turn it into a real business.
Got it.
And a lot of times that involves taking people that are looking exclusively at impact and mission, and they want to change the world. They want to figure out how to stop child mortality in India. They want to figure out a way to bridge digital divide. They want to figure out a way to help people with all kinds of health issues. The problem is that you have to get these people, frankly, to look at the world with dollars in their eyes a little bit and think about how the only way that their transformative idea is actually going to come to fruition is by thinking like a business person and learning those skills.
Exactly.
So yeah. We spend a lot of time teaching people it's okay to be happy making money.
Could I add something to that?
Please.
'Cause, and going through that process, and very often I think that that's a lot of what accelerators do, and also a lot of what tools like the business model canvas or the lean canvas do, is they help engineers who might have brilliant technology ideas understand who the end user is and how to serve the end user instead of just how to build a beautiful technology.
Right. No, it's a great point. The entrepreneurs and future entrepreneurs who have their hands up, do you know the biggest reason why entrepreneurs fail? Oh, I love that. It's the right answer.
No. Entrepreneurship just doesn't happen in the garage
Right.
by yourself
Right.
any longer.
Right.
Maybe in very, very few occasions. So for us, we see failure after failure just because people are unable to bring the right kind of right network around them.
Sure. And I think all points, at least from my experiential learnings of being an entrepreneur multiple times, and my wife will vouch for it, 100% correct. Statistically proven by many reports that the biggest reason why entrepreneurs fail, and it's because they're in love with what they do. They don't realize that the market needs it or not. And that could be timing. And that's the starting point, right? And then the execution of it is people, product market fit, distribution channels, channel strategy, pricing, etc. But the biggest reason they fail is because they're so in love with what they do that they don't realize that the market doesn't need it. An extension of that is the difference between a vocation and entrepreneurship. A vocation is when you build, often you hear entrepreneurs that say, when you raise capital especially, they say, I've come this far without raising any money, and I have revenues of about $200,000. So I need your capital to go to the next level. It's the most horrendous line, because building a business that gets you up to $100,000 is actually easy. It's reasonably easy. Um, After that, think of the customer, right? The customer who goes through a procurement process where there's a business unit who says, "I have a need for it," or in the consumer space, a consumer who looks at internet as a distribution model that pays for it, comes through the procurement cycle and actually cuts a check and writes you a check that pays for your product is a long drawn cycle. That's another way of saying that there is market acceptance. Otherwise, ideas are a dime a dozen. My grandmother has ideas in the bathroom all the time, right? And someone will possibly pay for it. That's a vocation. Entrepreneurship, at some point, is business. And one of my old bosses had this brilliant line that said, "The business of business at some point is business." And I think engineering entrepreneurs get sidelined with the technology that they build. So I think that's one takeaway for most of the entrepreneurs in the room.
So I'm sort of a little bit in awe of startups that succeed and the people who drive them. And it is really always the people who are central to the success of the startup. But one of the things I find most amazing about it is there's this like special secret formula to success. There's like a particular magic. And this is my way of seeing that particular magic is that you need the entrepreneurs, a good entrepreneur knows how to do two things that are totally contradictory and know when to do one and when to the other. So what is it? Is that on the one hand, it would be almost impossible to find a successful startup that didn't at some point in time pivot. That started with one idea and moved to a different idea. In Israel, I know a technology company that what they do is they connect feature phones, like not smartphones, to the cloud. And they thought when they started they were doing this so that Africans could connect to Facebook. And it turned out that what they were actually doing was helping large corporations or governments connect with people with feature phones. So there's almost always a pivot. So that's on the one hand. But on the other hand, there's a particular professor of entrepreneurship who used to be at Harvard Business School that used to have a slide presentation. Maybe he still does. And what he would do is he would show you all of these startups that hugely succeeded. And he'll tell you about each of these startups and how they were so successful. And then at the end of that presentation, he says, every single one of these startups were started by Harvard Business School students. You've got to think differently about what it means or how to do it or what the application is. I don't care what you say. I believe in what I'm doing. Because real innovation, like the breakthrough innovation, is almost always against the conventional wisdom. And almost always you're going to have tons of people saying to you, no, this is never going to work. So knowing when you're supposed to be pivoting and when you're supposed to be sticking to your guns is magic. And I don't know how it happens.
Very true.
So getting out of the room, talking to customers, get out of your lab is so important because if you don't know what the market wants, you'll never be able to. We had an experience in our accelerator after a 3-day boot camp. Half of the selected people, there were 12 of them, they started thinking of pivoting because they said, okay, when we spoke to our comfort zone people in the market, they all said, yeah, you're doing a great thing. The KOL said, the key opinion leader said, yes, this is going to work. These are all medtech startups I'm talking about. But when they actually spoke to 100 people, they found that probably this is not going to sell. It is easy to sell to 30 people, easy to sell to first 25 customers. Only the first adapters are going to take it. But if you can't sell it to 100, 200, 1,000, 1 million, it doesn't matter. It's not a business. So you have to understand what is the need of the larger customer base and not those 3 or 4 people who are ready to experiment because you are just coming with a new idea and they love startups.
Very true.
A lot of people say, yeah, I'm going to back a startup and just buy something from them. So that's not what we want. We want a proper market understanding.
Great point. In fact, segued very well into one of the things that I wanted to touch upon. And all three of you come from very diverse backgrounds. It'll be good to give the audience a sense of how many innovators end up becoming good entrepreneurs slash businessmen, right? And I want to start off with my own experience, and I'd love to get your take on this, specifically because you represent an industry which is life sciences, right? And lots of innovation, not necessarily all of them will become businesses. You've seen from your experience coming from an ecosystem which is arguably one of the best in the world, where success rates are much higher, in spite of it not having a market. So I want that perspective. And Josh, I want your perspective, given that it's such a dichotomy to be in the social realm and focus on building a business out of it. Right? So if you can think about that for a sec. So I'll give you my perspective on the difference between the innovator and the entrepreneur, and this is truly from personal experience. The fundamental definition of innovation is that you have an invention of some sort, you iterate it multiple times, and you get closer and closer and closer to the market, right? And therefore, the customer then ends up paying for that, and that's innovation. Entrepreneurship, on the other hand, may or may not necessarily start with innovation, but it's about grit and perseverance. And entrepreneurship is going all in. This is not lifestyle. You've got to go all in. I remember a time when, we were doing fairly well as a startup. We had about $1 million in revenue. We got this fantastic purchase order from one of the largest tech companies for an IoT system, which would have multiplied our revenue 3x. And at the same time, when you look at a balance sheet approach, which is a snapshot of this company, $1 million, maybe 20% EBITDA, getting a $3 million purchase order. Now you got to go raise working capital, and to raise working capital, you got to put collateral down, or you got to go get a line of credit. To get a line of credit, you need collateral. You need to go put your personal assets in. I broke my fixed deposits, put my money into the thing, which means you need to go hire another 30, 40 people to deliver. To hire 30, 40 people, you need to have planning in place so that these 30 guys will walk in 60 days from now. In the meantime, stuff is going down at the customer site. They're going to back out. Your collateral is down in the tube. You don't have money coming in anymore. Your investors are screwing you in the back. You get pulled down, and at the age of 35, you go crying to your mom and dad and say, I want more money. I'm at a loss. You go to your wife and say, oh crap, can we take another loan? That's entrepreneurship, right? And that's this is a good day. This is a very good day in entrepreneurship. So keep in mind that you got to go all in. There is no two ways about entrepreneurship if you want to succeed. So with that, I'd love to get your take on those, coming from three different backgrounds.
So there are investors in the room, right? You speak to the person who's come to pitch you this, and you say to this person, him or her, so who's your team? And that him or her says, oh, I don't have a team. I'm doing this alone. Are you going to be likely to fund that person? So, okay, because I've heard a lot of investors say to me that I'm looking for a team. If there isn't a team, I'm not going to fund this. I mean, and maybe it's something which is more prevalent in Israel than in other places, but there's a reason why people look for teams, because a person as a person is not stable, but also because the truth is you need the person, like you need people who are very committed to an idea, but you need a lot of different types of people in order to have a successful startup. So, and they're very, very rarely in the same person. Very rarely do you have a brilliant tech guy who's also a brilliant money guy, who's also a brilliant people guy, who's also or girl. And so if there's no team, like on the one hand, it's a less stable for me because it's like you're dependent upon this one person. You're going to get all your money in this one person. Something happens to this one person, what's just happened with your investment? But also because it's unrealistic to expect that somebody is everything all at the same time. So I don't know that like personally, I wouldn't necessarily distinguish between an innovator and an entrepreneur, because what I'm looking at is more for a package, and not all the things in the package are going to be in the same person.
So a highly competitive program, and those numbers have been going up every single year since the program started just in 2014. So it could be that 200 of those 300 applications are great ideas. It could be that 100 we see as a solid fit for the incubator. So how do you break that down into the 8? It is almost 100% I mean, at this point, you have all transformative ideas. I mean, these people are gonna break the mold in every single in education, health tech, energy, you name it. It's all about the person. We invest in the person. Do we see this person as a CEO? Can we see them being a leader? Can we see them building a team? Do we see them as the kind of person that can take advice, but know how to dismiss a lot of advice? And they get a lot of advice at Halcyon. And because we have so many experts, the thing about Washington is that every single company in the world has a presence in Washington, and those people, they want to do their, the motto is, they fight the wars during the day so they can join the rebellion at night, and they see Halcyon as the rebellion, the transformative change the world, and that's why we get all these pro bono actors to provide those services. So for us, it's also when you all have seen Real World. This is like Real World for nerds, right? These people have to be able to live together and work together and collaborate with each other every single moment of every single day. Isolationists and or people who are, I'm not saying a lot of our entrepreneurs are innately introverts, and because a lot of them come from scientific or engineering backgrounds, and that's kind of part of the game. But we want to make sure that they're actually able to collaborate, and we actually have. I mean, if you come to Halcyon, you see collaboration and kind of innovation happening before your eyes. And it takes a certain quality of person to do that. And frankly, it's really hard to gauge whether they are that kind of person in a 15-minute Skype call, which is what we end up doing with all of the final applicants, because they're from all over the world. So that's really the only way that we can do it. So gauging the kind of person, can I envision this person, really leading this company and really scaling it? That really has very little to do with the market access, the viability of the product, and the technology and innovation itself.
And we, as a life science incubator and park, face this all the time. But I want to make a point that incubators, how do you define success for an incubator and for a startup? Because for an incubator, you are actually in a developing country like India, you are also building a culture of innovation, and so you are a little lenient in terms of who's coming in. If you create a very difficult border, probably very few would percolate in. So we want to give a lot of people a chance, but at the same time, if you're putting money in them, we're very sure that the bars are higher. So an accelerator, the bars are definitely higher than what we would imply for an incubator. For a venture capital fund, it will be much higher because you have to return money, and it's not your money that you're putting, it's somebody else, the contributor's money. So it all depends at what stage you are taking these bets in. If an incubator, the good thing about an incubator, you can really look at very early stage ideas. A lot of early stage ideas are going to fail, and that's how it is. So it's okay to fail as long as they're willing to learn, as they're willing to pivot.
Right.
One thing also one needs to understand is, in India, we often say that since there are not enough jobs available, you can become an entrepreneur. Please no. Entrepreneurship is a choice. It's not like if you don't have anything, you become an entrepreneur.
Right.
If that is so, then probably you're in the wrong. Because here, people think that because of the flexi timing, because I'm the boss of myself, you're not your boss. Because you're answerable to your funder, you're answerable to your customers, you're answerable to the society, because what you're doing. So it's much more difficult, it's much more onerous to be an entrepreneur. If you're into it, please do, it's a 24/7 thing. I'm doing it because I have more control of my time.
Yeah, good luck.
Please you don't.
Good luck
Please
with
forget
that.
it.
The one contradiction I do have with Dipannata is that entrepreneurship is not 24/7, it's 32/8. Right? And on a good day you get 4 hours of sleep. Truly. But to sum that up, people, fantastic imaginers, while they have the ability to build a business out, and the ability to figure out where do you get that extra 8 hours on that single day. So 32 by 8. I mean, really, it is
Now that would be a
brutal.
good startup. That can figure out where to get the extra hours.
Because first of all, we have a massive pool of investors that we bring before the companies, and they've raised tens of millions of dollars from external sources. But we do not. We of course want them to do well financially, as I said in the beginning. That's a critical part of their success, to be financially sustainable. But I do not want to make you get a 2-year runway and you need to show a return as the principal criteria for getting into the incubator, because you're going to lose out on a whole host of potential major global impacts from these companies if you're looking exclusively at ROI. So I think that having a fund on the side to add on to the incubation services and the soft skills that a lot of these CEOs and entrepreneurs need is kind of a model of the future. Unfortunately, what you need is a nonprofit model where you can bring in a lot of donations to do that. And frankly, the United States is one of the only places you can do that, perhaps Israel, because of the massive philanthropic community that everybody kind of wants to be a startup investor, but not everybody is willing to take the risk of finding the startup that they really want to invest in. So investing in organizations that sponsor, the top highest potential startups, that I see as kind of a business incubation model of the future.
The idea should be that your stakeholders to some degree are your customers, which in this case are startups, the donors who provide you capital, the government, if they do end up subsidizing you to some degree, institutes, if you're backed by academia or by corporates. So every single one of them has different metrics towards which you're gauged and judged, and rightfully so. I'll give you the model that we operate on, and we'd love to get your thoughts on your own models. So we are not for profit. T-Hub is not for profit. We are profitable, but the money goes back into the ecosystem by design, and that's how it should be. We are self-sustaining, and that's why we're profitable. We don't take money from the government, because governments are designed to create boxes that are beautiful, cardboardish in nature. Entrepreneurs are people who figure out, where the hell do I get my money on the 31st so that I can pay my employees on the 1st, which means they hate cardboard boxes. And therefore, if you take money from governments as an incubator, the diktat that you have to stick to is to stick to a script. Entrepreneurs hate scripts, and therefore adhering to stakeholders on both sides for incubators is very difficult. So what we did was we don't take any money from the government. The government did give us a fantastic piece of capital to build this amazing piece of infrastructure. We do take money from corporates to find out the best-in-class entrepreneurs. For the co-working, we do take money from entrepreneurs, because at the end of the day, it's a business and they need to appreciate that. And we have a sidecar, which is a fund, which cherry-picks the winners and invests in them. We do bring lots of VCs onto the table to help them take off. So that's our model, and that's worked reasonably well. But I'd love to get your take on two things: your business model and who are your stakeholders.
So it is important to become profitable, but you have to really understand what is the scale needed for an incubator to become profitable. And of course, there are a large number of government-funded academic incubators who probably are looking at a not-for-profit model where it is difficult for them to become profitable because of the structures they're in. We are a private incubator, not-for-profit private incubator, and that's why we know how to leverage donor money in programs, but for core funding, we did not depend on the government. So the programmatic money has come from the government of India, and we run a large number of grant challenges with Gates Foundation, with USAID, with DFID, with governments, both the national government and government of Karnataka, where we select and scout for good ideas and get money from the government to fund them. So there are various kinds of programs that one can leverage where there is enough donor money, programmatic money available, but you have to have a running business, whether it's rentals, whether it's services, whether it is equity-linked money that's coming in. That's one needs to figure. We also have a small fund.
I mean, if I had a couple of rupees for every empty government-run business incubator I've seen around the world, I'd be a very wealthy man. And it's not to dismiss the government's role in all of this. They have a very important role, which is to create a regulatory environment. I mean, we don't get money from the government, but we work with the city of Washington very closely to make sure that social enterprise is a critical part of their entire economic development strategy. So we provide kind of the technical know-how of how to attract some of these top entrepreneurs from around the world and how that's going to actually lead to DC's economic vibrancy and diversity. But I mean, I do think that corporate partnerships are very important and critical for an incubator to be successful. And for us, I don't really care why Amazon or Capital One or Deloitte want to be a partner with Halcyon. It may be part of their corporate social responsibility. It may be that they're looking for a pipeline of future customers. It may be that they just have people who, like I said, want to fight the rebellion at night. Who cares? I mean, let them have, and we will give them a whole host of reasons why they should be. But the in-kind kind of services that those kinds of partnerships create, you can't buy. No startup can afford overseas market research analysis by Deloitte or McKinsey. These are comprehensive legal services for broad overseas incorporation and or market analysis for establishing facilities in foreign countries. I mean, or even just the patent, the expense of doing patents. I mean, the fact that they're getting these services. So the in-kind kind of donation model is a really important one, the one that's definitely worked for us. And actually it does, in some respects, lead to more direct financial contributions from other companies who may not have those kinds of resources, but they're like, look, let's give you a little bit of money to support your health enterprises or your education enterprises. So we really do value corporate partnerships, but I will be very clear that those corporate partnerships do not in any way create the model for Halcyon and or influence the kinds of companies that we bring in. We still stick very closely to our criteria, and our donors understand that. And we're in a lucky situation because our founder donated the entire facility to us. So we have this 30,000 square foot, 230-year-old mansion in Georgetown. It doesn't suck. It's an incredible place. So that makes it a very easy case for attracting a whole new set of donors. We also have an arts incubator where we do the same thing with emerging artists, teaching them how to have more social impact through their art. That's attracted a whole new base of donors who are interested in expanding the arts and humanities. And we have a whole bunch of programming that combines our artists from the art incubators and our businesses from the business incubator, and we found that to be incredibly powerful. And we do, to watch kind of tech entrepreneurs interact with sculptors and filmmakers and artists, they're collaborating with each other on branding ideas and marketing ideas, and it is truly, for anybody who is looking at creating a new incubator model, figuring out a way to bring in the people from the creative economy and to mesh them with businesses and ventures and enterprises. It is a miraculous thing, and I also see that being a model of incubation in the future.
Obviously, the earlier stage you go, the less you can rely on the companies that you're trying to build or support in order to in any way provide money, and we're the same as you in the sense that we don't take equity. I mean, my feeling is that for a startup, there's so many investors and programs that get a pound of flesh by the end of it that there's almost nothing left. I remember, before I was in this world, thinking, wow, this startup had $100 million exit. They must be rich. and then finding out that actually, they've barely broken even in terms of all of the money that the founders of the company have invested all of the time, because all of that money went to everyone that invested in them. Because the business model is such as an investor that you're expecting, when you're investing in an early stage company, that most of your investments are not going to actually pan out. So if you want to make money, the one that does pan out has to pan out for you big time. So I don't really have much to add, but what was coming to mind as we were talking about this was our hackathon.
Sure, yeah, that's a great one. That's a great one that you should talk about. Yeah.
So Jay and I have worked together, and we organized...
Great experience, by the way.
It was.
Yes, fabulous.
So here's what we did. We, it's funny, I was sitting, we did a hackathon in 4 locations. When I say we, I mean we. In 4 locations at the same time in Hyderabad, Bangalore, Mumbai, and Tel Aviv, with cross-border mentoring, so that somebody in Tel Aviv could video Skype with somebody in Bangalore and say, I'd like to really understand about this, like end user needs or about the conditions here, and they were able to do that over the course of the day and the night, and we had Indian corporates that were standing online all day long and in order to do this, and so we had 1,000 people registered in 4 different locations, and going through this whole thing, and $10,000 in prizes, which I can't convert to lakhs, but
5 lakh rupees.
and it was an amazing thing with 10 different challenges and an enormous amount of energy. Now, as an aside, yesterday I was in a panel, and there was some investor from Dubai who was in the panel, and he was talking about how you can get a lot of your bang for your buck out of very small investments. Like he said, with a few $100,000, you can do a hackathon that will do a lot more than larger investments. So he said this, and I thought, a few $100,000, our 4-location hackathon, my budget for that was $10,000.
Yeah.
And that $10,000 mostly went to flights for my staff going back and forth.
Right.
Because we had 40 Indian corporate sponsors, 10 Israeli sponsors, and in a certain sense, it takes a village. And what I think that we are good at is getting a lot of people to give us free stuff.
That's right.
Which is sort of funny when you're working on helping people not have to use that model.
Exactly.
It's like, so we don't really preach what we or practice what we preach, because I think that
that's the pivot. That's the pivot.
No, I never pivoted. I never pivoted for profit. I started in government. I'd like to say, in the defense of the Israeli government, that Israeli government incubators are full and have a very it's true, and have a very good reputation as this is the stamp of approval if they're in a. But I think I think in general, what we're really doing, all of us on this stage, is we're communicating a vision for an ecosystem we believe in.
That's right.
And there are enough bodies out there that have that same vision that it enables us to do what we do in a way that makes it possible for startup entrepreneurs to succeed without us also taking that down our flesh.
Very true. If there's one thing that breaks boundaries and walls, it is Startup Nation, right? So, and to your point of how we all work towards the community, truly today we live in a time where the ecosystem is truly global, and it's fantastic for all of us to be part of it. So, thank you all for that.